Hello, and welcome to Rethinking Our History, where we seek to shed a light on events that have been forgotten and covered up, and to make us all question how much do we really know about our history? I'm Felicia.
And I'm Ian, and we are here to reveal all the sordid details of history that have been swept under the rug. Get ready to get angry, be curious, and maybe have a laugh or two as we rethink our history.
Hello, friends.
Hey guys.
Thanks for joining us for another lesson, number 20. We have the kid on the VR, so if you hear screaming in the background, no one's being murdered, there's no ghost. It's a 7-year-old playing gorilla tag.
Pay no mind to the man behind the curtain.
It's fine. Sorry if I look stoned. I'm not. I'm just worked all week, which is the first time I've done that in a year. So I'm real tired today.
Yeah.
Um, if you found us here first and are a fan of the supernatural, give our flagship show, The Paranormal Lovers, a try. 100 episodes about everything from Barbara Lamb and the Lizard Man
Great episode.
to the Children of God cult.
Not so
a great
great
episode.
Especially since they're is that the one that's real close? No, that's 12 tribes.
That's the 12 tribes that's in Asheville.
Yeah.
They have a farm in Asheville. Y'all, I'm not okay with that. Anyways, we are going to be at Hotlanta on Lake Lanier, March 14th through the 16th. We will have hand-dyed t-shirts. Yeah, hand tie-dyed shirts for sale for $20. Any leftovers will be used for our Patreons. You can find that at patreon.com/paranormal lovers. There for only $5 a month, which if you're boycotting like Starbucks like you should be, you'll have those few extra dollars. You get unedited early access to videos of these episodes. I said that wrong, but whatever. As well as stickers and, maybe a tie-dye t-shirt.
Love stickers. Working on some new stickers.
Mm-hmm.
Should be pretty cool.
If you would be so kind, please give us a follow and share on the social medias and YouTube. Search for the Paranormal Lovers on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube to find us. If you would like to buy some merch to help support the making of this pod, head over to theparanormallovers.threadless.com. And lastly, if you have a personal story or a topic request, please email us at theparanormallovers@yahoo.com.
Yeah.
So theparanormallovers.com. That ain't right. We ain't got that no more.
Hadn't had that in a while.
Nope. So, of course, it's Black History Month, regardless of what people want to say.
Hell yeah.
What little things they want to sign. Fuck them. It's Black History Month. Every month should be Black History Month. American history is Black history.
It's true.
I could go on.
Rock and roll,
Mm-hmm. And while I had to take a break from the rage-inducing topics last week, we are back full force this week. This week, we are going to look at the life and legacy of one of the most influential Black women in U.S. history. From Wikipedia, quote, Ida Bell Wells Barnett was an American investigative journalist, sociologist, or sociologic, educator, and early leader in the civil rights movement. She was one of the founders of the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, or the NAACP. Wells dedicated her career to combating prejudice and violence and advocating for African American equality, especially that of women. End quote. Warning here at the beginning, there will be talk of sexual assault and lynching. Lots of talk of lynching.
So, I've heard that name before. I don't know where I've heard it, but
I believe it may have been the Lake Lanier episode when we spoke briefly about Ida.
Oh, yeah?
Her words about white women led to a white mob destroying the office of the journal she worked at.
Mm-hmm.
Ida was born on the Boiling Farms near Holly Springs, Mississippi. Ida was born to enslaved man James and enslaved woman Elizabeth Lizzie Wells on July 16, 1862. Due to the use of Peritus Sequitur Ventrin, since Ida's parents were enslaved, she was also born into slavery. James had been born by an enslaved woman named Peggy and her white captor. Once he was 18, his captor, who was also his father, quote unquote, rented him out to Spires Boiling as a carpenter's apprentice. While James was technically getting paid for his work, all of his money went to his quote unquote owner. I get nauseous saying all this stuff, but it's history, folks.
Yep.
Lizzie had been one of 10 kids born captive on a plantation in Virginia. She was abducted and trafficked away from her family. She attempted to find them after the Civil War with no luck. Lizzie was held captive by Boiling and used for domestic labor. James built most of the Boiling Gatewood house where Boiling lived. In 2002, this house became the Ida B. Wells Barrett Museum, although the Wells family actually lived in a shack out back. After the Emancipation Proclamation, James became a trustee of what was Shaw University, but is now Rust College. He joined the Republican Party. Let's not forget that they flipped. He ran a successful carpentry business, and Lizzie became a famous cook. Ida, who was one of 8 children, attended Shaw University. Slight side quest. There is a historic black college in North Carolina, first one ever in North Carolina, named Shaw University in Raleigh.
Nice.
And I know that because from the time I could remember when we lived back on the eastern side of the state, we always went to the Raleigh parades.
Mm-hmm.
And they were in every single parade, whether it was St. Patrick's Day or Christmas or whatever.
Yeah.
They fucking got down.
I bet.
My mom would be like, "Oh shit, here comes Shaw University. They're gonna get that. You know how they do." Like, she'd be so excited to see them. They were amazing.
Yeah.
Still are amazing.
That's cool.
In 1878, a yellow fever epidemic broke out, and both of Ida's parents, as well as one of her brothers, died from the disease. After their funerals, the families wanted to split up the children and send them to live with various relatives. But Ida refused to let them get split up and took it upon herself to raise her siblings. She got a job as a teacher at a small school outside of Holly Springs, and during the day, various relatives would look after the kids while she worked. And she was only 16 at the time. In 1880, their grandmother Peggy had a stroke and her sister died. In 1883, Ida and her 2 younger siblings moved to Memphis to live with their aunt, Fanny Butler. After the move, Ida was hired by the Shelby County school system. During the summer, she took classes at Fisk University and HBCU Nash. I really got to enunciate that because when I hear other people say Nashville, a lot of them say it like so quick. And like they'll say that N so quietly that it sounds like Asheville. And I'm like, hang on, let me go back. Happens a lot with the podcast that I listen to, Killer Queens. They're based out of Nashville, Tennessee.
Mm-hmm.
And I got to tell you, I love their country accents. Like, people think we have country accents. You should listen to Killer Queens. Them girl, she got a thick country accent.
Yeah.
She was also attending Lemonnier Owen College and HBCU in Memphis. Ida was very outspoken about her views, especially concerning women's rights. Quote, "I will not begin at this late day by doing what my soul abhors, sugaring men, weak, deceitful creatures, with flattery, to retain them as escorts or to gratify a revenge," end quote. And it's not to say that Ida hated men. She did not. She would get married. She also kind of feels like I do about men, and most of y'all ain't shit.
Right.
In 1883, the Supreme Court ruled against the Federal Civil Rights Act of 1875. This gave transportation companies the ability to segregate their passengers. On September 15th, 1883, and May 4th, 1884, Ida was subjected to this racist practice when she was ordered to give up her seat to white passengers. On the September incident, when Wells refused to give up her seat, 3 white men forcibly dragged her out of the car. And y'all wonder why we look angry all the time. Touch me, motherfucker, and see what happens. Ida wrote of her treatment in an article for The Living Way, a black church weekly. She then hired an attorney to help her sue the railroad company. Unfortunately, that lawyer was paid off by the company, so Ida hired a white attorney. This attorney won her suit, and Ida was awarded $500, or roughly 16,000 US dollars in 2025. Sorry, my brain just shut down.
somebody made a Barbie doll, Ida B. Wells.
I need it.
It's pretty
I
cool.
need it. Patty can't have it. It's the only Barbie. Like, give me all the Barbie dolls that are created after influential historical female figures.
Right.
I don't want all those other ones that, like, oh, I'm a doctor. Oh, I'm a veterinarian. I'm a roller skater Barbie. And weird Barbie. Give me that one too.
Yeah.
However, the company appealed the ruling to the Tennessee Supreme Court, where it was reversed in 1887. In their ruling, they stated, quote, "We think it is evident that the purpose of the defendant in error was to harass with a view to this suit, and that her persistence was not in good faith to obtain a comfortable seat for the short ride." End quote. Essentially, they said she wasn't trying to just have a comfy seat. She was trying to make a statement, which, like, yeah, right, motherfucker. That's what a lawsuit does. And that is our right as American people on this land in this United States that we stole from the native people and that we built up off the backs of brown and black folks. That is our goddamn right.
Yeah.
But the courts did not agree, and Ida was ordered to pay back the court cost. She was not silent with her disappointment, however, as she was recorded saying, quote, "I felt so disappointed because I had hoped such great things from my suit for my people. Oh God, is there no justice for us in this land? Or is there no justice in this land for us?" End quote. No, Ida, sis, no. 150 years later, no, there's still no justice for her people
No.
in this land. Ida kept teaching, but also picked up a couple of writing gigs. She took an editorial job for the Evening Star, a small Memphis journal. She also began writing articles for The Living Way under the name Lola. She did so, I believe, so she could attack Jim Crow laws with some semblance of safety. In 1889, Ida became editor and co owner of the Free Speech and Headlights with J.L. Fleming. This black owned newspaper was established by Reverend Taylor Nightingale and based from the Beale Street Baptist Church in Memphis. Gotta say, doing all this research for this episode, I was like, I kind of regret ever going to Memphis. I won't be back.
Right.
In 1891, Ida was fired from teaching by the Memphis Board of Education. Not sure what they wrote in the paperwork, but she lost her job due to how outspoken she was about the conditions at black schools. While heartbroken, Ida let this energize her writing in The Living Way and the Free Speech. In 1892, another event happened that fueled Ida's passion. In 1889, a friend of Ida's, Thomas Henry Moss Sr., opened the People's Grocery. Ida was friends with the Moss family, such good friends, in fact, that she was named godmother to Thomas's first daughter, Maureen. Thomas's store did well for itself, even being across the street from the white-owned grocery store, Barrett's Grocery, owned by William Russell Barrett. On March 2nd, 1892, a young black teen named Armour Harris, and a young white teen named Cornelius Hurst. Cornelius. Boy, when I saw that, I said, oh, that explains it. Cornelius. Sorry if your parents named you Cornelius after 1950. There was no excuse for that. I apologize. We're out front of the People's Grocery playing a game of marbles. The boys started arguing during the game, which turned into a fist fight. A fight Armour was winning. Seeing his son losing, Father Hurst jumped in and began quote unquote thrashing Armour. Inside the People's Grocery, employees William Stewart and Calvin R. McDowell witnessed the fight and came out to defend the young boy against the bigger and older adult. While a mob grew outside the store, not more took place on this day. The next day, March 3rd, Barrett showed up at the People's Grocery with a sheriff's deputy in tow. He was greeted by Calvin, who told him William Stewart was not there. Angry at that answer, the fight the day before, and the fact that he had to compete with a black store, Barrett claimed, quote, blacks were thieves, end quote. Barrett then pistol whipped Calvin. Calvin was able to get the gun away from him and fired at Barrett, missing him. Calvin was arrested but quickly released. On March 5th, a group of 6 white men set out to the People's Grocery on electric streetcars. In this group was Sheriff's Deputy Charlie Cole, who was wounded when the men were met with gunfire as they arrived at the store. Also wounded from the gunfire was civilian Bob Harold. Fearing an armed rebellion from black men in the city, hundreds of scared white men set out to put a stop to it. They arrested Thomas, Calvin, and William and put them in jail. I feel like, ironically, there should be a semblance of safety in jail in that you should not be concerned about people coming from the outside, inside, to get to you.
Yeah.
And I get it does happen. Like sometimes people will literally commit crimes so they can go to jail so they can fuck up somebody else that's in jail.
Right.
Y'all, I got 5 uncles. They've done some shit. Okay. But in 1892, there was no safe place for black people. Definitely not a jail. Quote unquote, guarded by other white supremacists.
Right.
Around 2:30 a.m. on March 9th, 1892, 75 men in black masks took the 3 men from the jailhouse to a railroad yard outside of the city. There they were shot dead, but before he was murdered, Thomas told the mob, quote, "Tell my people to go west. There is no justice here," end quote. Now, ignorantly, I always thought lynching was referring to the act of hanging a person by a noose.
Right.
And it is, but that's not all it is.
Yeah.
From Britannica, quote, lynching, a form of violence in which a mob, under the pretext of administering justice without a trial, executes a presumed offender, often after inflicting torture and corporal mutilation, end quote.
Hmm.
After her friends were lynched, Ida wrote in the Free Speech, quote, "There is, therefore, only one thing left to do, save our money and leave a town which will neither protect our lives and property, nor give us a fair trial in the courts, but take us out and murder us in cold blood when accused by white persons," end quote.
It's horrible.
I'm glad that I'm starting to become numb to these facts of history because it's a fucking horror movie.
Yeah.
It is the world's worst horror movie. If you just literally made a movie about shit, about like one lynching, pick any lynching that we've talked about.
Yeah.
And make a movie about it, it's going to be like rated R. Like,
yeah.
These murders inspired Ida to investigate lynchings. She began interviewing individuals who were in some ways involved with a lynching, like one that took place in Tunica, Mississippi. Here, Ida found a white father who disapproved of the relationship between his daughter and a young black man and asked the lynch mob to kill him to, quote, save the reputation of his daughter, end quote.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at any horror movie in Hollywood, the basis of the plot is like almost the same thing. Like somebody does something that another person doesn't like, and then they wind up breaking into their house at night, kidnapping them. Like,
yeah,
you know what I mean?
Yeah,
Torturing them.
It's
crazy.
Yeah, and like people have went through this.
Yeah,
it's
this
like
is real life. This is not a horror movie.
I don't remember who we were talking to. I think maybe I was talking to somebody at work about it, and I was like, when the war in Russia started, we didn't really let Patty watch the news because she was like, what, 4 at the time?
Yeah.
And like they were showing some really fucking graphic shit, like on WLOS. Like it was intense.
Yeah.
So it's like, no, she doesn't need to see this. But now as I get into this history, and she's a little bit older, she's only 7 now, but she is older. She's better able to understand shit than she was when she was 4.
Yeah.
I'm like, there were kids that were being tortured and murdered and working on the plantations and being raped and assaulted. Obviously, she doesn't know anything about that. She doesn't know anything about sexual stuff.
Yeah.
But, these kids are forced to pick cotton and be beaten, then she can learn about these kids being forced to pick cotton and be beaten.
Yeah.
And I feel that way about all children her age and growing up. There are age appropriate ways to do it. You don't have to just go, well, yeah, they just did this and that. No, I'll straight up tell her, like, yeah, they were mean. They hurt these kids. They beat these kids, but I'm not going to like show her pictures of their back split open. You know what I mean?
Right.
Talk to you, kids.
Yeah.
In 1909, Ida spoke at the National Negro Conference and stated, quote, during the last 10 years from 1899 to 1908, inclusive the number lynched was 959. Excuse me. Of this number, 102 were white, while the colored victims numbered 857. No other nation, civilized or savage, burned its criminals. Only under the stars and stripes is the human holocaust possible. 28 human beings burned at the stake, one of them a woman and two of them children, is the god awful indictment against the American civilization, the gruesome tribute which the nation pays to the colored line. End quote. Yeah. Nat Turner's wife. Nat Turner was either an enslaved man or a freed man that was murdered and then eaten. His wife was 8 months pregnant and they hung her and caught her on fire and then cut her baby out and threw it in the fire.
Jeez.
And yet they call us savages.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this was years before Hitler came into power. And as we know, he modeled his crimes after eugenics within the US. I like this new phrase that I come up with, and I think I'm going to put it on the shirt with a nice American flag on it. It says, "We are the best at being the worst."
Yeah.
Now, from a previous episode, we know Ida was not quite quiet about how fucked up it was black men were being imprisoned and murdered due to rape allegations from white women. One case she learned about in 1892 involved a white woman who accused William Offutt of rape. And a lot of shit happens in 1892. I don't know. Was it an age of Aquarius? Was Mercury in the Gatorade or the microwave? I don't know. Some shit was going down in 1892.
Right.
William was sentenced to 15 years in prison and served 4 before the woman told someone the truth. When Reverend Isaac T. Underwood learned his wife had lied about being raped and got an innocent man locked in prison, he set on a crusade to get William released, which he did, and eventually even got him a pardon. It was on May 21st, 1892, Ida published the words that would see the office of the free speech destroyed. Quote, "That old threadbare lie that Negro men rape white women. If Southern men are not careful, a conclusion might be reached in which will be very damning to the moral reputation of their women," end quote. Remember those words? That was what dude told him in Oscarville
Mm-hmm.
that got his ass beat on the courthouse steps. As history has shown, white men do not appreciate it when they feel they have been quote unquote disrespected. They take even more offense when that perceived disrespect is aimed towards white women. And they especially do not take it well when it comes from a black woman. On May 25th, the Daily Commercial published, quote, "The fact that a black scoundrel, Ida B. Wells, is allowed to live and utter such loathsome and repulsive calumnies is a volume of evidence as to the wonderful patience of Southern whites, but we've had enough of it," end quote. The same day, the Evening Scimitar copied and published that article, but they took it a step further. Quote, "Patience under such circumstances is not a virtue. If the Negroes themselves do not apply the remedy without delay, it will be the duty of those whom he has attacked to tie the wretch who utters these calamities to a stake at the intersection of Main and Madison streets, brand him in the forehead with a hot iron, and to perform upon him a surgical operation with a pair of tailor shears," end quote.
Jesus.
These are words that are published in a newspaper.
That's crazy.
This is why I condone violence.
Yeah.
She wrote words, and they're talking about fucking branding people in the forehead and cutting off their dicks with shears.
Yeah.
Fuck them. And fuck anybody else who thinks it's okay to treat black people this way because you see us as some sort of lower life form.
Yep.
Fuck all y'all. Yeah. Like, y'all tried, not y'all.
I know.
The y'all. They tried to break us with 400 years of chattel slavery, and we survived. So they lynch us, and yet we survived. So they burn our homes and businesses down and put us in ghettos, and yet we have still survived. So again, I say, fuck y'all.
Yep.
Back to Ida. Thankfully, Ida was not in Memphis when the mob formed and busted into the Free Speech and Headlines office. They destroyed as much as they could, even doing severe damage to the building itself. Co-owner and business manager of the paper, James Fleming, had to flee the city, and men were stationed at the train waiting for Ida's return. And I need people to realize what would have happened to this woman had she gone back to Memphis. She would have been attacked at the train station. She would have been paraded through the streets, probably raped, and then hung from a tree or light pole while they shot her body and then chopped up into little pieces as souvenirs. This woman was going to be murdered for writing words in a newspaper.
Yeah.
The audacity of people to call us angry black people, like, fuck y'all. Fuck y'all right up the ass with a double-headed purple dildo. That used to be my go-to insult back in like high school. I don't know why. Although he had sold his shares of the paper to James and Ida, Reverend Taylor was hunted down, beaten, and forced at gunpoint to sign a letter retracting Ida's words. Ida never returned to Memphis. She had been in New York City when the mob attacked the offices, so she just stayed there and continued her work. Excuse me. At first, she stayed with Timothy Thomas Fortune. Saying Timothy Thomas is weird. And his wife Carrie, and would spend the next 3 years in Harlem. Also, if you're wondering, Ida is 30. 30 at this point. Ida began publishing her research on October 26, 1892, in a pamphlet titled Southern Horrors, Lynch Law in All Its Phases. Unfortunately, you cannot find copies of this anymore because they were all destroyed. Unless somebody has like a bootleg, like a copy of it that they smuggled out. They got every single copy of this they could find and like
got rid of it.
Tried to destroy it. Her conclusion was simple. These black men being lynched were being accused of rape to hide the real reason for their murders. Can you guess?
The white women liked them better.
What is the root of all evil?
Money.
Ida concluded that white Southerners wanted to keep black people as second-class citizens so that they would not do better than the white man. Sup, son? We will cover more towns that were destroyed due to this, but we've already covered Oscarville and Wilmington, both events instigated by jealous, scared white men.
Yeah.
They are far from the only places, though, and not all of them happened in the South. In 1885, Ida published the 100-page Red Record. This was a sociological investigation of the lynching in the U.S. since the Emancipation Proclamation 33 years earlier. It also looked at the struggles of black people in the South since the end of the Civil War. Let's just say it is pretty fucking horrible.
I bet.
1880 to 1930 saw the largest number of lynchings, although they lasted well into the 1970s. Ida believed during legal chattel slavery, lynching was not as common because, slaves cost money.
Right.
And like the better your farm equipment it is, the better you're going to take care of it, right?
Sure.
Yeah. And that's what we were looked at. So,
yeah.
Ida believed that during Reconstruction, people outside of the South had no idea how bad it was for black people in the South. That was not to say lynchings didn't happen outside of the South. In fact, it was illegal for black folks to live in Oregon for years, and any caught would get whipped every 30 days until they left. Which is a fun fact I found out this week. And I was like, he's so beautiful over there. And I want to burn it to the ground. But the South, as the former Confederate, has a unique history of racism and lynching of black people. Wells stated that since slavery had ended, quote, 10,000 Negroes had been killed in cold blood through lynching without the formality of judicial trial and legal execution, end quote. Also in the Red Record, Ida explored the eras of quote-unquote Southern barbarism and white people's excuses for their actions, which had been previously discussed in an article written by Frederick Douglass. Quote, and this is a bit of a longer quote, so bear with me. And you can jump in anytime. During the time of enslavement, she observed that whites worked to repress and stamp out alleged race riots or suspected rebellions by the abducted, usually killing black people in far higher proportions than any white casualties. Once the Civil War ended, white people feared black people, who were in the majority in many areas. White people acted to control them and suppress them by violence. During the Reconstruction era, white people murdered black people as part of mob efforts to suppress black political activity and reestablish white supremacy after the war. They feared so called Negro denomination through voting and taking office. Wells urged black people in high risk areas to move away to protect their families. She observed that whites frequently claimed that black men had to be killed to avenge their assaults upon white women. She said that white people falsely assumed that any relationship between a white woman and a black man was the result of rape. But given power dynamics, it was much more common for white men to take advantage of poor black women. She stated, "Nobody in this section of the country believes the old threadbare lie that black men rape white women." Wells connected lynching to sexual violence, showing how the myth of black men's lust for white women led to the murder of African American men. End quote.
Hmm.
She published research from white press bureaus and white newspapers from 1892 to 1895 that showed in numerical form how many lynchings had taken place. She had also added very descriptive accounts of lynching, which helped her readers conceptualize the scale of these injustices. People in the North were horrified when they learned the truth about these lynchings. Many were willing to believe the lies of the white murderers as to the cause of their actions, and most never read or heard a word of the horrors inflicted on these victims. The Equal Justice Initiative states that between 1877 and 1950, 4,800 or 4,084 African Americans were murdered in the South. 25% were accused of sexual assault and 30% of murder. Rarely, if ever, were the lynchers actually persecuted for the murders they committed. 4,084 black people were murdered.
Wow.
That's a lot in less than 100 years.
Yeah.
Without a trial.
Yeah.
And y'all wonder why we seem so angry all
That sucks.
the time. Although Ida did her best to get support from white American mobs to stop lynchings, she realized that most white people would not be willing to give up their economic power to help black people. Seeing that reasoning and compassion would not criminalize lynchings by Southern whites, Ida believed armed resistance was a reasonable way to defend against these murders. Quote, "A Winchester rifle should have a place of honor in every black home," end quote. What is ours?
For sure.
Smith & Wesson?
No, it's shit, I don't even know.
I think it might be a Smith & Wesson, actually. I don't know. We got a rifle. They're coming to my house. Ida visited Britain twice, seeking the support of the white British to condemn lynching in the U.S.
Also, it's important, like, in today, like, given the political climate and, like, let's just say if you're going to a protest with, a lot of people that are either black or gay or, anything that's not white, white guys, white women go to these protests and stand in front of these people. Like, it's important. Like,
if you are
they're
a white
much less
person,
they're much less likely to kill someone if white people are standing in front of them.
we watched W. Kamau Bell, of course. What up, Kamal? And you had told Ian about there's probably more than a couple. You could probably honestly go on Instagram or Facebook and find organizations where if you are a left-leaning white person who is a fan of the 2A, it almost feels like it is your responsibility to be the line between those of us who are fighting for our very basic civil rights in this country, for you to put your body in between us and the people wanting to hurt us when you call yourself an ally.
Go and be loud.
That is what an ally looks like.
Get in their faces.
If you claim, what was it? What is that phrase I saw this week? It was like something like, if you claim to be an ally, but you're not getting hit by the rocks that are being thrown at me, you're not standing close enough. Like, you need to start a local organization of leftists, firearm toting white people that can go out to
Yeah.
these protests and be the wall.
Yeah.
Because I was like, I was shook and I was like in love with these white people that were like, hell yeah, we're going to go out there. Fuck these right people over here. Like, yes.
Why do you think I'm growing my Civil War stash?
Cheese and rice. No, what you need to do is shave. And then once everything goes down, then you grow it out. Ida visited Britain twice, seeking the support of the white British to condemn lynching in the U.S. She visited in 1893 and 1894. During this time, travel across the ocean was done by boat. She states that this journey led to complex emotions due to the history of the Middle Passage. This is a woman who was literally born as an enslaved person and got her freedom as a teenager. Like, Ida had been invited for a speaking tour by Catherine Impey and Isabel Fyvie Mayo. Catherine was a Quaker abolitionist who published caste. I don't remember. There's a system it's really common thing in like West Asian countries like India. I'm sorry if that's the wrong location for India. I'm not good with geography. It happens a lot in India where you have like the chase system, I think it is, where you got like the rich people and the poor people. She wrote a pamphlet anti that and heard Ida speak while traveling through the US. Isabella was a writer who published under the pen name Edward Garrett. It was after hearing about the murder of Henry Smith that these two women decided to organize a speaking tour in Britain to bring attention to the lynchings in the US. The Henry Smith case involves the death of a child, so I will not be covering that. Also, it is one of the worst lynchings I've ever read about. Like, he was tortured for an hour by a mob of over 15,000 people.
Jeez.
Before he was doused in fuel and set on fire to burn alive. So, I won't be covering that one. It's real bad. If you want to look it up, there's a Wikipedia page. Admittedly, the Wikipedia page does show that it needs a lot of verification.
Yeah.
But I'm sure you can probably find some Black Rand pages that have the story of it on it too. So,
yeah,
it's a bad one. Catherine and Isabella had initially asked Frederick Douglass to attend, but he declined due to his age and health. He did recommend they ask Ida, who enthusiastically accepted. Before leaving in 1894, Ida contacted William Penn Nixon, who was the editor of the Daily Inter-Ocean. The Daily was a white-owned newspaper and the only one in the country that regularly denounced lynchings. After hearing her plan, William asked Ida to write for the paper while she was there. Ida would be the first Black woman to be a paid correspondent for a mainstream white newspaper. Ida would tour through England, Scotland, and Wales for 2 months. I bet she they were just like touching her like, oh, she's so pretty. Sorry. She used her pamphlet, Southern Horrors, and photos of lynchings along with her words to rally support. On the last night of her second tour in 1894, the world's first ever anti-lynching organization was created with the formation of the London Anti-Lynching Committee. Its founding members included the Duke of Argyll, Sir John Gorst, the Archbishop of Canterbury, and Lady Henry Somerset. Very, very important people. While Ida was touring across the UK, US papers were doing their best to tear her down. The New York Times published an article against Ida and her tour, including calling her, quote, a slanderous and nasty-minded mulattress, end quote. I hate that word so bad. But Ida's words did their job, so much so that British textile owners boycotted Southern cotton until Southern businessmen began condemning lynching publicly. And she did all of this by the age of 33.
Nice.
She's only 33 in the third.
Good for her.
And this is where we're going to leave you this week's folks. There is so much more that Ida went on to do in her life, so you're going to have to come back next week if you want to hear me tell you about it. So what do you think about Ida so far, Bill?
I think she's an amazing person. There's a lot of beautiful portraits of her on the nets.
She's a very beautiful woman. She's a very beautiful woman, and I'm like, man, that style back then, too many layers for my taste. But it looked real pretty.
Yeah.
Yeah, she did a lot, and she didn't stop. And I am really fucking glad she wasn't in Memphis.
She looked like a force to be reckoned with.
I'm trying to embody some of that.
Yeah.
Like, that's the energy I want right there. I want that kind of energy.
Right.
All right, folks. Well, thanks for joining us for another week, and we will see you guys next week.
Love you guys.
Love you. Bye.
Bye.